Let me tell you why I'm here. Like you, I read about the subprime scandal. Like you, I've seen the meltdown of the financial system. Like you, I read all the warnings that the financial crisis is quickly developing into economic crisis. Maybe not like you, I didn't believe in it for a second. But then, on the 1st of January, because of a fluke, 4th of January, I got a real wake-up call that I want to tell you about. 5 top managers of a large component manufacturer company from Japan came to me to Holland for a few days to plan the strategy, the tactic, the implementation plan of that company. By the way, don't try to guess who is this company, because if you'll go to the internet and you'll search under Japanese companies, large component manufacturing, electronic component manufacturing, you will find more than 400 of them. So there is no point in trying to speculate which one it is. My problem was that about 5 minutes after they enter my house in Holland, it became apparent to me that their question is, how many people should we lay off? Not whether or not we should lay off, but how many should we lay off? And this was a real shock. I don't know how much you know about the Japanese companies, but they are so different than the American companies in terms of relating to the issue of laying off people. Laying off people in Japan is absolutely the last resort. You do it only if otherwise there is a real danger that the whole company will collapse. Otherwise you don't even contemplate it. And here they are, not asking whether or not we should lay off. They've already decided on it. The question is how much? How many? And I couldn't believe my eyes. Let me describe to you their situation. Like you, they are reading newspapers. Like you, they are aware of all these endless headlines, not just in the US, worldwide, that the economic recession is here, and if they compare it to anything, they compare it to the large depression, to that extent. But then, in November, their sales went down, and in December, their sales plummet to 50%. Ladies and gentlemen, they said they've never ever seen such a thing. In all the history, long history of their company, they've never seen that order book is dropping to 50%. Now look what do they see? Limo, I will need your help. Where are you? Schematically, let's put what is the situation as they saw it. Look on that. Here is sales, constant, nice. As a matter of fact, not so true. Sales have been up and up and up for the last 7 years. Now we are reaching November, it starts to go down. December, it's 50% of what it was. 50%, and all the newspapers are saying, why? There is a world crisis, a world depression. Put yourself in their shoes. Remember, when I've talked with them, it was the 4th of January. They're here. Can you imagine the debate inside their company? Do we see the end of it? Or maybe the sales will continue to go down. Maybe it will stabilize here. Maybe, if we are optimistic, it will go up. This is the amount of uncertainty that they're facing. Now you see what they're saying. Of course we have to trim down the manpower. We don't have any choice. The question is how much? And we don't have a clue. And now we have to tell our shareholders, we have to tell our company, what is the forecast? How are we going to organize ourselves? Not even a hint. Do you understand the magnitude of the panic? Hello? And this is not a unique company. This is a multi-billion-dollar company. What do? How can you get a better read? How many of you read any one of my books? Beautiful. Do you think that there is an answer? Do you think that there is a way to get a reliable answer? Because if you don't see it, you haven't read any of my books. How many of you have heard about a new book that came less than a year ago called The Black Swan? Oh, at least some people are reading it very nicely. And if you think that I am hard on academia and on Wall Street, read that book. I'm a pussycat. This book was written by a professor of mathematics who also spent the last 30 years as a broker in Wall Street. And what he's saying is people don't understand reality at all. Let me quote from him, because his examples are so vivid and so nice. His way to demonstrate things is by far better than mine, so I will not hesitate to borrow. First of all, he says, from his experience in Wall Street, the biggest mistakes that we are doing is we are looking on very successful people in Wall Street, and we think that due to the fact that they are very successful, they must be very intelligent and very capable and really knowing what they are doing and so on. And he said, reality is that these people are, no, I will use his words, lucky idiots. And he says why he claims it. He said, suppose that you play Russian roulette. If you win, you get $10 million. And now suppose that you can play it once a year. So let's start with a group of 5,000 people. And now, what do you think will be the situation 30 years down the road? And he said, we will get very few extremely rich people and a large graveyard. Now let's look on these few very rich people. What are they? They are the people who played Russian roulette once a year. In other words, imbeciles. And he said, that's the real situation, and he proves it very nicely. What he's trying to tell in his book is to what extent extrapolations are dangerous, especially in real life, unbelievably dangerous. And instead of extrapolation, you must use cause and effect. Cause and effect can be extrapolated. Gravitation law was correct yesterday and most probably will be correct tomorrow. This is something that you can rely on. Extrapolation is idiotic. If you notice, look on that picture. What have we used so far in order to predict the future, in order to know what to do in 2009? Extrapolation, nothing else. What happens when we use cause and effect? Cause and effect is simple. If you read any of my books, it's embarrassingly simple. But it's so decisive. Shall we use cause and effect here? Hello? Do you mind? Fine. Before we do that, I want to give the examples that he's talking about in terms of cause and effect and demonstrating the black swan. And he says the following. A turkey wakes up in the morning, a person comes, gives him food. The turkey is very happy. Next day, turkey wakes up in the morning, a person comes, gives him food. Turkey is really happy. Third day, turkey wakes up, person comes, gives him food. Day 50, the turkey is already expecting to get the food. Day 100, same thing. Day 101, the turkey wakes up in the morning, a person comes, cuts his head off. It's Thanksgiving. Why do you think we gave you all the food? Cause and effect, and you know it. Extrapolation, what a big surprise. Black swan. Fine. Let's use cause and effect. This company is producing, as I told you, electronic components. To whom do they sell it? They sell it to companies that are building the electronic systems. Companies like Sony, Panasonic, and so on. The OEMs, let's call them. To whom Sony is selling? To retail. To whom retail is selling? To the end consumer, to us. Correct? So far, anything new? No. Good. Now, will you be extremely surprised if I will tell you that whatever the retail is selling had to be produced by the component manufacturer? Hello? That's not a revelation. And that's why, when I talked with this gentleman, I said, fine, your sales has dropped 50%. How much, in December, how much is sale to the end consumer, from retail to the consumer? How much was the sale there? What happened there? Do you know what was the answer? We don't know. We didn't check. Said, so what have you checked? Said, we went to our clients, to Sony, to Panasonic, and they told us that their orders are down. Why not to go all the way to the end of the supply chain? Then we said, okay, what really happened to consumer electronics sales to the end consumer? We don't know either. So we used our connections. We called our friends in Nikkei magazine. Remember, we are on the 4th of January, and we want to get data on December. There is not much time. You have to go to the best sources. Do you know what Nikkei magazine? Have you heard about the Nikkei? Have you heard about the Dow Jones? Okay? That's equivalent for Japan. So the Nikkei magazine is the magazine that is publishing the Nikkei index. Okay? So of course they have the best information and as fast as possible. We called our friends and we asked, what happened to consumer electronic sales to consumers in Japan in December? And the answer was, it went up by 14%. We asked 3 times just to make sure that we hear it correctly. It went up 14%. Then we said, okay, but that's Japan. This company is selling over 80% outside Japan. What's happening in other places? And the place that we want to check was the US, because the US was the source of the financial meltdown, and because of it, you expect that the first one to be affected by the ramifications will be the US. So what happened to retail in the US in December? Forget just consumer electronics. Let's talk about all retail. It took them 24 hours to come with the answer. They had to pay for it. If you want it so quickly, you are paying for this information. According to the best information that we got, and we got it from 3 different sources, I will talk about the most pessimistic one. We got 2 answers. One is, in December, there was a new phenomena that was not observed before, which is retail have given unprecedented reduction in prices throughout all of December. Remember when usually the reduction prices are given after Christmas? This time in the US, it was throughout December. And by the way, the average numbers in consumer electronics was between 25 and 30% reduction price. That was one piece of information. The other piece of information, well, depends on what was the source. The most pessimistic source talked about 3% drop in the sales. Nothing to do with 50%, if you notice. 3% drop. By the way, what registered in our minds? When we are talking about 3% drop in sales, the drop is sales in dollars. Okay? If we know that retail gave reduction of price of, let's say, 25%, what was the drop in quantity sold? Shall I repeat? 25% reduction in price, 3% drop in dollars. What was the drop in quantity sold? It went up by over 20%. And by the way, for you as a manufacturer, what you care is how many quantities were sold. Hello, what the hell is happening here? Now we have reliable data, two pieces of data. One is their sales definitely dropped 50%. The second one, the sales to consumers did not drop at all, maybe went up, but if it dropped, it didn't drop more than 3%. By the way, if you read newspapers in the US, this is closed and that retail is closed. Will you please do some small calculation? There is another piece of data in all the newspapers. What happened to Walmart in December? Up by 2%. Now take 2% of Walmart, compare it to all the chains that have been closed, compare it. Who do you think is bigger? But now we have a mystery at last, much better than forecasting by extrapolation. How can it be that their sales went down 50% while the actual sales to the consumer didn't change? How can you explain such a dichotomy? Well, the explanation is quite obvious. Retail, people who run retail, also read newspapers. Do you agree with that? So they see all the headlines about recession. If you are a retailer and you read these headlines, what do you do almost instinctively? Think about it. What is the nightmare of a retailer? The nightmare of a retailer is to get stuck with yesterday's merchandise. Am I right? Because that's been bankruptcy. So if you read these headlines, what do you do? By definition, what do you do? Everybody, instinctively, you reduce inventories. There are two ways to reduce inventories. One is give reduction price to sell more, and that's exactly what they've done. And what is the other one? Stop buying. Reduce the inventory, but stop buying. And that's what they also did. Now put yourself in the shoes of the OEM. You read all the newspapers, recession! Your orders dropped on you because retail is trying to reduce the inventories. Now you are absolutely sure that the recession is here. What do you do now? You reduce your orders from your suppliers, but not to the extent that your orders were reduced. You too reduce your inventories. Am I right? Now you see the snowball effect? Now you are the component manufacturer, and you are looking, and you see 50% drop. In order to prove it to them, I asked them, you hold inventories as well of material. What was your orders from your suppliers, the material suppliers? And they checked and they said, we have dropped it by 85%. You see now the snowball effect? Hello. Now we understand what's happening. Now, of course, the question is, since we know that at the end, the orders on the manufacturer must be in line with the sales to the consumer, they must come to par again. The question is how much time until the balance will be gained again. Okay? Until the orders from the manufacturer will again reflect the sale to the consumer. And the answer is, when will it happen? When the inventories will be dried. Am I right? Must be. Correct? Beautiful. How much time it will take? Well, it depends on how much inventories there is in the pipeline. So, what you have to do is just go in the internet and check the retail, and you'll find out, depends on the type of industry and so on, how much inventories they have. And they have between 3 and 4 months inventory. And now you go to the OEMs, and you'll find out, and all the numbers are in the internet. It takes 10 minutes to find it. They have between 1.5 to 2 months inventory. This means that if you are a component manufacturer, there is 6 months of inventory between you and the consumer, max. Don't forget, the system cannot operate with zero inventory. So flashing out does not mean to bring it to zero. November passed. December, not only that it's 1 month, it's a huge sales month. So how much time before the inventory will reach the level that the retail have to start to order again? How much time? Another 2 months? Hello, am I right? Now the question is, in which level it will stabilize? And we know it will stabilize at about the level of the purchasing of the consumer. Am I right? How much will it be? Now don't panic. Don't tell me there are so many layoffs and because of it, it will go down. Yes, in the States there is much more layoff anywhere else, partly because you Americans are crazy. And layoff is done like that. Everywhere else in the world, layoff does not generate cash. It consumes cash at the beginning, except for the United States. Okay? And that's why it's so easy to shoot yourself in the foot here. It's not good. It's anti-capitalistic, by the way. Anyhow, how much is it? For that, I think that we can look on something that looks on all the facts in the economy. Because, for heaven's sake, have you noticed that other things have happened at the same time? Things that are regarded usually as extremely good, but nobody somehow is talking about it today? Do you recall what happened when energy prices or oil prices are going up by 20%? At that time, all the newspapers are filled with warning, what a bad impact it has on economy. What happened to oil prices in the last few months? Hello? 1/3! It went from 140 to 40. What happened to all the metal prices in the last 3 months? Went to half. This has also a huge impact on the economy. What is the total? Well, for that, let's see what the economists that have the tools that force them to look on every aspect are saying about the GNP. Because the GDP or GNP, how much is the wealth created, is a very good indicator to the consumption power. Are you with me? Hello? What do you think do you see? Go to the internet, search it. There are many, many sources. Let me show you the most pessimistic ones that I've seen. There are many sources. And by the way, it doesn't take more than 10 minutes to get the information. The green is 2008. The blue is a forecast done by economists on 2009. As I told you, this is the most pessimistic one that I found out. What do you see? Look, if we are talking about developed countries like China, according to this forecast, instead of growing 10% next year, they will grow only 8%. By the way, don't laugh on China today. China, just months ago, have crossed in consumption power, became bigger than Germany. China today is the third largest consumption power in the world. This is not small. So only 8% up. Let's look on something very bad, like the US. And according to that, instead of growing by 1.5%, we are reversing. We are shrinking to something like -1%. Ladies and gentlemen, as much as -1% is not good news, where the hell is that? And 50% drop. What are we talking about? Changes of 2 or 3%? A company that cannot sustain a 3% change in its sales should be closed up. For heaven's sake, from 1 month to the other, every company has these fluctuations. Big deal. World recession! That's why I'm not exactly jumping up and down from joy when I read 2 days ago that the consumption in January in the US went up by 1%. Big deal. It's all within the noise. But what does it mean? Put this together. Use cause and effect. What is now the obvious schematic outcome? Sales were very nice, stable. November, December, pluck to 50%. But now we understand where it's coming from. We understand that this drop is not due to actual drop in sales to the consumer. This drop is a natural reaction of retail reading the headlines. We understand that because of it, we just have to wait until the inventories are flashed out, and we have very pretty good idea of how much inventories, and then it must come back. To what? We really don't know exactly. It depends what will be the consumer level, plus or minus 3-4% of the GDP. Would you lay off people just to hire them back after 2 months? Not if you are not total imbecile. More than that, remember, you are not the only one who laid off. In 2 months, you and your competitors will need to hire back. Now look on a person that you've laid off, and 2 months later you come to hire him back. Do you think that he loves you? What is his opinion about the management of this company? So if he can get a job in any other company, you will be his last preference. And then it means that you will hire not the people that you fired. Now you have to train them. You will not be able to react to the orders that are coming back. You shoot yourself directly in the foot. Is it understood, yes or no? Isn't it obvious? Wait a minute. But we heard so many things in the newspapers. We heard that consumer sales went down dramatically. Did we? Oh, yes. What is the example that jumps into mind when you are talking about drastic drop in consumer purchasing? Which? Cars. Cars. And real estate. But mainly cars. Why? Let's think about it. We all know where it started. It started from a financial meltdown. Because of it, in October, the banks went into paralysis. Nobody could have got a loan in the bank. Not even if your name is Rothschild. Have you noticed that there is something very peculiar about cars? This is credit-dependent purchasing. You go to a car dealer and you try to buy it in cash. He will not sell it to you. It's mafia money. Cars are totally based on credit purchasing. And if the banks refuse to lend money, what will happen to the sales of cars? Plummet. Big deal. But from that to extrapolate on the entire things, only Americans can do. Sorry, fellas, I'm not an American, I'm an Israeli. That's probably I care about America more than you are caring about America. If America is getting a wet nose, Israel is getting the ammonia. So we care about the strength of America even more than you. It's our life depending on you. For heaven's sake, don't you see the difference between extrapolation and using cause and effect? Use the cause and effect, and it's so obvious. That's the situation. Now it's obvious what to do. More than that, you understand perfectly that the biggest window of opportunity for growth have opened. All the systems have shaken. All the old loyalties have shaken. And if you know what you're doing, you can take the market. Just think a little bit more cause and effect and you see how obvious it is. But if you extrapolate, you will lay off. Just to show you how correct it is. This company, the next week after they came back from Holland, the first thing that they've done was to go back to their suppliers and to identify those suppliers which are small and not solid enough. Because let's face it, the more remote from the market you are, from the end consumer, the bigger is a hit. More than that, the longer it will take the recovery. Those suppliers of material which are small will not survive the transition period. So they actively went to their small suppliers and helped them financially. Not because they're altruistic, but because they want to make sure that as the orders are coming back, that they will have the material to supply it. At the same time, a week after they came back, their larger competitor, which is also a Japanese company, have laid off 25,000 people. 25,000 people. Fellas, don't look on it as just economic problem. Somewhere in the internet, I've read now, what is layoff doing to people? I'm not talking about the economy, I'm talking about the people who've been fired. And according to that, in the US, 1 out of 1,000 people who are laid off is committing a suicide. We are talking about lives here, to that extent. 25,000 people laid off. Okay? This means mass murder. And for no reason. They just shoot themselves in the hip. Oh, by the way, who do you think is, these companies that we are working with, is the prime target to go after? It's the clients of their competitor that laid off the people. Because what do you think is a service that these clients will get? These are low-hanging fruits. Will you please learn to use cause and effect? Haven't you noticed that whatever I showed you is just simple common sense? But haven't you noticed something else? Nobody's talking about it. A week ago, I'm reading an article in Wall Street Journal that says maybe the recovery will not take 2 or 3 years, maybe the recovery is only 2 or 3 months. And I'm reading this headline and saying, at last somebody thinking. Until I'm reading inside, no, nobody thinking. This headline was based on the analysis of the last 9 recessions in the US, showing that 8 out of 9 was recovered in 2 or 3 months. Not a glimpse of cause and effect. Again, extrapolation. You read my books? You haven't. Because the real message of my books is what? Will you please start to use cause and effect? What you are in illusion is that you are using it already. You are not. You are using extrapolations. Here is the proof. And as I'm screaming for the last 30 years, being successful in business is so easy. If you think cause and effect, it's like competing against blind kittens. Are you aware that every one of my books is based on real cases? For example, The Goal, which was written in '83, is based on 3 cases that I've molded into one. It's all real characters, it's all real numbers. For example, this client that is flabbergasted of how good he got, and he comes to thank every worker, and nobody knows what he wants because there was no special effort. This is the head of purchasing of General Electric coming to Howmet Turbine to personally thank every worker because they saved his ass on the jet engines. None of the workers knew what he's talking about. There was no special effort. That was run of the mill. This is '83. You know, I'm getting so many letters for my books. The ones that I cherish the most, I received less than a year after The Goal was published. And he wrote to me, that's a plant manager from the US. He wrote to me, Dr. Goldratt, your book is not a novel anymore. It's documentary. because I've done exactly what you write in the book, and I replicated all the results. And the only difference between your book and my reality is that my wife didn't come back yet. 30 years. Again and again and again, the proofs to what extent common sense really work. The proofs again and again and again. To what extent we are using extrapolation rather than common sense. To what extent we are victims of the admiration of sophistication. I'm a physicist. Do you know what is the rule in physics? Okay, let me give it to you in two ways. One is, don't fool yourself, people from management. An average physicist knows more mathematics than you. That's our tools. Nevertheless, you will not find one single article in physics that the mathematics is inside the article. It's only in the appendix. Because the rule in physics is, as long as you are using mathematics in order to explain what you're talking about, that by itself is a decisive proof that you don't know what you're talking about. You have to express it in cause and effect. Otherwise, it means you don't know what's going on at all. The other rule, you know that the Nobel Prize is the wet dream of a physicist. As a matter of fact, physicists are divided into two groups. Those that still dream on the Nobel Prize and those that gave up. What you probably don't know is that the committee that choose the Nobel Prize winner has only one criteria in selecting the winner. And the criteria is, you have to write an article. One is enough. 4 pages are enough. 2 references are enough, which means in management it will not be accepted. Minimum 50 reference, right? But the article must be on the level that when any other physicist reads it, his reaction is, oh shit, that's a Nobel Prize. Once you figured it out, it's so clear that here's the answer. Otherwise, it's wrong. It's the opposite of sophistication. Not in business. Look on how the subprime scandal have happened. It was not because people have tried to cheat. It's a fantastic example of over-sophistication that went out of control. And by the way, I've got a beautiful lecture for my son-in-law 2 years ago saying exactly what's the bubble. He was wrong only in one thing. He said it will blow in our face in 1 year. It took 1.5 years. The entire cause and effect of what's happening, how nobody's paying attention, and how it will blow in our face. It was there for anybody that thinks cause and effect. My American friends, we are going now into the biggest economical growth and opportunity. The biggest ever in the history. Who is talking about recession? The opposite is correct. Let me prove it to you. Are you interested to see it? Yes. Hello? Yes. At the same time, remember, what is a Chinese curse? Make you live in exciting times. Exactly. And we are going directly into them. Overall, it's fantastic. But somebody who doesn't know what he's doing, the pockets of failure, of demolition will be immense, much more than ever before. Let me show you, first of all, where are we standing. Limo, can you show me the statistics of China? What I'm going to show you is something that is open in the public domain. Anybody that bother even for 5 minutes to go on the internet to get the data. This is official data. Look, starting from 79, the growth of the GNP in China is between 7 and 10% a year. Year after year after year after year. This is the red line here. That's an exponent. compare the GNP in 1980 to the GNP in 2007. It's incredible. For you to understand what's the meaning of year after year after year, just think in terms of compounded interest. If you take a loan in compounded interest, and you have to pay it after 30 years, I don't care how rich you are, you're bankrupt. That's the meaning of an exponent. Now, pay attention to something that is not written in the economical books. Maybe because until that phenomena, we've never seen it in reality. In all the economical books, and I've talked with many economists, and they took it for granted, that as the GNP is growing, unless you're talking about a corrupt country, the wages are growing in line with the GDP. You create more wealth, people are making more salaries, directly in line. And if you noticed, this is correct in China until about 1990. By the way, why do I say non-corrupt countries? Because in corrupt countries, this growth does not go in higher salaries, but goes to the pockets of very few people. Then you don't see the increase in accordance. Look what's happening in China. The blue curve is average wages in China. Everybody, not just industrial zone, including the farmers, including the unemployed people, the average wages. This is the blue curve. Have you noticed that this is another exponent? Hello? And the separation started about 10 years after the GNP have grown, and then it becomes bigger and bigger. Look on how big it is. It's mind-boggling. Look, here I put only until 2000 because I don't have room. So let's make room. This means I'm squashing the curve. I'm not doing anything except for changing the scale, okay? So the red curve is still an exponent. Please, I don't know which one to. I hate technology. Believe me, when we had books, I knew how to turn a page. It's like a bar. No. You are as bad as I am. Hui. Chazara. Okay. That's it. Okay? If you noticed, the red looks much, much smaller. I simply doubled the scale. Even then, I cannot put on the graph 2007 for the wages. Let me explain to you what we see here. In order to have a reference of what is the meaning of these wages, turns out that already in 95, China have reached the level of Egypt in terms of average wages, about $600 a year. India, it's 500 now, okay? We cannot even contemplate $600 a year. Do you know where's China now? It's about $4,000. And if you look on what's happening, if you assume another 5 years of the GNP growing at just 7%, and all the prediction is it's much more, China will cross Germany in terms of average wages. Already China is not just the largest producer of the world, it's number 3 in consumption. Ladies and gentlemen, 5 more years of GDP bigger than 7%, and it's number 1, bigger than America. Hello. This is good news. Unfortunately, you are looking on China as a competitor. For heaven's sake, when will America wake up and understand that China is a huge market? dying for you to export there. How many of you know, even though it was published in all the communications, September of 2007, the Chinese government have switched for major sections of its industry, and I'm talking about 2007, switched the export incentives into export penalties. Can you imagine it? Do you understand why? What is the meaning of these wages going up so much? There is an internal market. People want to buy. They have money to buy. By the way, according to the statistic in China, mainland China, there is more than 300,000 people who are millionaires in dollars. Yes. What happened is, and I've seen it because we have many clients in China. Here's a manufacturer, which is export. By the way, you have to understand what's the meaning of export. In China, a company that exports less than 60% of all its volume is called non-export company. Shall I repeat it again? Exporting less than 60% is non-export company. Here in the States, we are exporting. We send one order to Canada. Fine. What happened is, here are companies, quite large. All what they're producing is to Europe and the Americas. They have probably 6 to 8 clients, big clients. For that, you don't need a sales force. The president is the salesperson. They don't have any sales force. They don't have any distribution capabilities. And that's why, even though what the Americans or the Europeans are paying them is half of what they can sell next door internally, half they cannot sell because they don't have the infrastructure, not of sales and not of distribution. That's when the government forced them to start to service the internal market. Why? Because otherwise inflation would have started in China. That's the meaning of having so much money to buy and not enough to buy. And that's the Chinese government cannot afford. Ladies and gentlemen, please open your eyes. Are you aware what is happening in India? Starting from 2008, the GNP in India every year is about 7%. The difference is that the blue curve and the red curve did not wait in India for 10 years until they're separated. Look what happened to the wages across all of India in the last 2 years. 25% per year up. The curves are already separated. Right in front of our eyes, 2 billion people are joining the consumer world. The biggest economic growth in the history of mankind. And you're blabbering about recession. Who are these imbeciles? A journalist should report on 2 things, on facts and analysis. Consumer in December went down 1.7%. I don't have a problem with such a headline. I have a huge problem with a meltdown! And then you have to read 3/4 of the article to find the 1.7%. Totally unconnected. The journalist should have been the first one to step up, to do the analysis, the cause and effect analysis, and to say, there is a financial crisis. The financial crisis, we are out of it in unprecedented rate. For example, in October, you couldn't find anybody to finance your car, and today, you can start to fish around between the banks. We are going out of it so quickly. But to say economic crisis, this is totally responsibility. Because remember, we will continue to lay off and so on. We can create a self-fulfilling prophecy. Hello. Ladies and gentlemen, we are entering into the biggest economical growth ever. You are totally not ready for it. Companies don't know even to handle one bottleneck. Don't you understand what's the meaning when the consumption is going up so much? We will start to see bottlenecks everywhere. God forbid that you are involved in a supply chain that has interactive bottlenecks. One in one company and the other in the other. The throughput of the entire supply chain plummets. You are totally not ready. More than that. First time in history that number one power, and there is no number two, is a moral country. A country that really has morals. Do you really believe that you can continue to be the number one power if you will not have economical power? Americans, please, look what's happening. The consumption center of the world is moving to India and China. 2.3 billion people. Will you please realize that you are an island? That the US is an island? 300 million people? Island! Start to get the perspective correctly. You know, first time that I went to China and they asked me, where are you from? And I said, I'm from Israel. And they say, how many people are you in Israel? And I say, 6 million. And they said, in which hotel do you stay? You are an island, and right now you are 6 weeks away from the real markets. 6 weeks. Look what this recession, this scare of recession, will do. It will do something which is unbelievably good. Can you figure out what it is? Just think cause and effect. Bring me back figure 4. Look. The retail now have started to order. Yes, they have started to reorder, of course. לא, אני רוצה את פיגר 4. מהמאמר, את פיגר 4, please. They are still scared because the newspapers are still filled with the gloom and doom. And because of it, even though they are ordering, they are not ordering in the big batches that they ordered before. They are ordering in small quantities. Every one of them. Make sense? Yes. What's the meaning of ordering in small quantities? It means that if you don't order in 3 months batches, but in 3 weeks batches, you're ordering also many more SKUs per month. They will find something astonishing. Because they totally believe, because that's how all their systems are built, and that's what is taught in all the universities, that there is a trade-off. More inventory, less shortages. Less inventory, more shortages. And all the professors are teaching the min-max method, the tortoise graph, and so on. So they all believe in it. Today, because of reality, they will violate the basic assumption. They are changing the batch size of ordering. They are not ordering anymore the economical quantities, which were never economical, except for in the mind of some academics. They will order much smaller quantities. And what are they going to find out? They're going to find out that their inventories are much lower, and at the same time, their shortages are much lower. And because of it, their return on investment will shoot through the roof, about double. How many of them, once this will happen, will not go back to the old things? Almost all of them. We're going to talk about changing of the standard due to what happened. Look on how good it is. Why do we have this scare? Because of this huge gap. What is this? This gap is a function of the amount of inventories in the system. If you look back, you will find out that in the last 20 years, In production, we've reduced the inventories to less than half of what it was. It's all due to one person. His name is Taiichi Ohno. How many of you have heard about Taiichi Ohno? Not enough. That's a person that invented the Toyota production system. Just in time, lean. He had a huge impact. The inventories in production went to half. I consider myself as his pupil. By the way, Toyota considered me as his heir. And Toyota is going now on TOC, on a huge scale. Anyhow, in the last 30 years, the inventories in retail did not change at all. And because of it, the majority of the inventories today are in retail, not in manufacturing. This change, that reality will teach now the retail, will cause retailers to reduce the inventory in less than half, which means the next time that we are going to another one of these crazy bubbles, the impact will be much, much smaller. This is very good news. At the same time, it means that retail will start to demand better and better availability. 6 weeks away from the market means that the retail has to hold minimum 4 months inventory. He will not in the future. Which means, Americans, please, we have to take as a national mission to start to build cargo airplanes. That's the only way to shrink the 6 weeks into 1 or 2 days. Otherwise, you are an island, isolated island. This has to be a national work. Can be done. No problem. And yes, we can reduce, in this scale, the transportation prices to be negligible relative to the inventories that otherwise the retail has to hold. It is possible. Boeing, raise your hands. Will you please move your ass? You are not talking anymore about Boeing. You are talking about your country. Are you patriots? And start to move. We have wasted all the spare time. This is 5 to 10 years away. How much time it will take to build 2,000 cargo airplanes? More than that. And you know how much we can do it. You are the one who proved that you can do it in half the time. Fine. What I would like to do now is the following. I want to make a 5-minute break because I must smoke. And then, I would like to talk about how not to miss, once again, this fantastic window of opportunities that is open because of the fast scarce. What actually companies have to do, no matter in which industry you are. How to really use cause and effect in order to move the companies forward without taking risks. In other words, I'm going to try to sell you as much as I can to go on TOC. So whoever wants to leave before I'm starting my real sales pitch, use these 5 minutes that I'm going to smoke to leave without insulting anybody. But after that, I'm coming, and I will do all that I can to try to convince you to please go on common sense and how important it is. Okay, 5 minutes?
I'm going to apologize in advance. Dr. Goldratt will not be available immediately after the presentation. We have a very tight flight to get him on for his next presentation that he needs to be at. So we are going to get started again. You've each been handed a review sheet. We would really appreciate if you could fill that out and hand it to one of my staff that's wearing one of the TOC ICO shirts. If you do have any questions, I will be around after the presentation that I can answer questions for you. There is information out on the table out there about the Theory of Constraints International Certification Organization, as well as information from the Pacific Lutheran University School of Business, our host for this morning. And with that, I'd like to turn it back over to Dr. Goldratt.
I don't know how to teach you to do common sense in 2 hours. But I think that I can do it in 3 days, which is also quite an achievement. I'm going to give such 3 days in the States 2 weeks from now. What you have to realize, that TOC is not logistics. TOC is actually a different way to look on our reality. The way of cause and effect rather than extrapolation. In these 3 days, the first thing that I'm going to show you is to what extent we totally developed a wrong perception about improvement. That our perception is that to improve substantially a major area takes years. We also know where it's coming from. It's coming from the same person that have contributed so much to the world, Taiichi Ohno. It took Ohno 15 years of incredible fights inside Toyota in order to put his system in place. It's not just Ohno, it's also Toyoda, the president of Toyota at that time, the two together. For 15 years, and this is written all the books of Ohno himself, everybody in Toyota called his system the abominable Ohno system. It didn't make any sense to the people. Unbelievable effort to make it work. And that's why the advocates of just-in-time and lean, which, by the way, do not fully understand what Ohno have done, and that's why if you go to Toyota and you talk about lean, Toyota said, lean is not what we are doing. You are distorting totally what we are doing, and they're right. But the impression is that it takes 2 or 3 years to get a real improvement. This is unbelievably wrong impression. What I want first of all to do is to show you that the first step should be to put some security in the company. Right now, most companies are afraid of credit. Many of them are even afraid of cash. What I want to show is that the improvements of the first step to take are so effective that in maximum 2-3 months, you can generate to your company, you can release cash from operation much more than you can ever dream of generating cash through cost cutting. By far more, order of magnitude more. And how simple it is. And what's the whole logic. And of course, what I will start is to show you real cases of things which are by far more complex than what you have. And that the bottom line in terms of cash released, sometimes in 3 weeks, sometimes in 3 months, was by far more than you can get if you lay off even 30% of your people. Order of magnitude more. The real difference is that these actions are constructive and you can build upon them, where the cost-cutting is so destructive. That's the first thing to put on the table. And then I want to explain the whole logic of why it is. And what I'm going to do is to go back to the originator of it all, of everything, which is, and it cost me blood to say it, it's Henry Ford. It cost me blood to say it because he was one of the greatest anti-Semites that were ever in America. But he was the creator of all modern industry. To show what is done, to show what is the concept, to show what is the application, to show how Ohno have expanded it dramatically, and to show, based on this foundation, how we can take it to the next step, which is TOC. And that's when the improvement to the cash, to the bottom line, is so incredibly fast, and there is no resistance. No resistance to it. By the way, any one of you who have tried to use what is in the goal, find out that he gets zero resistance from the people below. Once this is established, and the whole perception of speed and magnitude is now starting to change, I want to talk then about the real lesson that we have got in the last 3 months, which is to what extent our companies are fragile. To what extent every scare in the outside conditions can really endanger our entire company. Which means the real thing is to start to realize that we have to start to immunize our company, to bring it to the extent that if there is whatever changes in the economy around us, our company will continue to be very successful without any threat on it. And in order to do that, I want to establish the concept of decisive competitive edge. I want to take out the impression that the only way to get a decisive competitive edge is through some patents or new technology. I want to show you what is a spectrum, and I want to prove something else. I want to show you that each company, if they just put their mind to it, can generate a decisive competitive edge, and I want to show you exactly how to do it. Once we establish that, I will move on to talk about the real problem. Ladies and gentlemen, what do you think is the real constraint of companies? It's not bottlenecks, and it's not the market. The real constraints of companies is the bandwidth of management. And to what extent management are wasting the constraint. And if we understand that, now comes the real thing at last on the table. Don't you realize that if you really want to improve your company, the real problems is called communication and synchronization? Communication means between the levels. Synchronization means between the functions. The bigger the company, the bigger the problem. Already 30 years ago, I've told to CEOs of large companies, it doesn't matter what you think. Will you please stuck it hard in your head? Big CEO of this big company, it doesn't matter what you think. What really matters is what your people think that you think. And it's not the same. Communication is a huge problem. What about synchronization? As long as we will talk about kingdoms, as long as we talk about silos, don't you realize what is the magnitude of the problem? And open all the books. What do you hear about synchronization of communication? What do you read? Blah, blah. Pew, blah, blah. I want to address it and show what is a real tool that you can have fantastic communication and synchronization. And for that, we have to go back to basics. We have to go back to the extent that we have to ask ourselves, what is strategy and what is tactic? What is it? We know. Strategy is at the top and tactic is below it. Oh, lovely. How do you go from strategy to tactic? Some miracle happens. Open whatever books that you want. If you do what I've done, which is to try to put my hand on every book that's written on strategy and tactic, none of them is talking about it. Only blah, blah. So what have I done? I've done what a physicist is doing. Recognizing that these words are not defined, and then you go and define them. But as a physicist, define things. Let me show you what I mean. And as an example, let's take one of the greatest physicists of all time, Einstein. You know that Einstein have developed the relativity theory. What do you know about relativity theory? Some of you may know a lot, but everybody knows that it's something about space and time. Fine. What is time? This was argued since the ancient Hindus and the ancient Greeks. Do we have a consensus of what is time? No. So Einstein had to define time. Let me show you what is the definition of a physicist. How did Einstein define time? Time is the things that we measure by a clock, period. How do you like that? That's the definition of physicist. Totally practical, leave me alone with everything else. Strategy. For me, strategy is the answer to the question, what for? What is tactic? The answer to the question, how? Sounds right to you? But look what is a phenomenal revolution the minute that you accept these definitions. Do you agree with me that any action, doesn't matter if it's a whole movement or it's a tiny action of how to align this part of this machine for this part, doesn't matter what action, we should ask what for, and we should ask how. Have you noticed what's coming out? Strategy and tactic are always defined together at the highest level and in the lowest level. So when we talk about strategy and tactic, we have to define this couple all the time, and we have now to define the rules of how do you go from the highest movement to the lowest backing detail. This is what is called the strategic and tactic tree. This is probably my biggest invention, by far bigger than the 5 focusing steps of the constraints. Because what I found out later, after this was done, that I stumbled on the answer for communication and synchronization. And it's working beyond my wildest dreams. That's what I want to show you. That's what I want to show you. First of all, to prove to you to what extent you don't have it. And here I'm using the techniques that Lisa Scheinkopf have developed. She took the 5 building blocks of the S&T, converts them into questions, and what we are doing is we are asking everyone to stand, and then we are asking 5 questions which relates to your work, to you personally. And we are asking the following. Try to answer them honestly. If you don't know the answer, and please be honest, sit down. And we read one question after the other. Each one is obviously super relevant. At the end, when we finish with the 5th question, everybody's sitting. Now, if you don't know to answer it to yourself, how can you talk at all about communication and synchronization? It's obvious that this cannot be done. But from that now I'm showing that whatever I've done in the previous 1.5 days is actually using it. Actually using the answers all the time in a perfect logical structure. Once you do that, that's where you can show the concept of ever-flourishing company. How we can use all these elements together in order to really have bigger and bigger stability while the financial performance are at the same time on an exponent, unrelated to what will happen in the market. And how do you do that? Where you don't talk at all about resistance to change. Ladies and gentlemen, will you please stop with this nonsense that people resist change? This is baloney. Do you want that I'll prove it to you? I need a volunteer. Okay, I will use the Israeli way. You are volunteered. You are volunteered. Sit. Let me just ask you some questions. Are you married? Yes. Do you agree with me that becoming married is a major change in your life? Yes. Did you want to become married?
Yes.
How lovely. Wait a minute. Do you have kids? What? Do you agree with me that once you have a kid, your whole life changes?
Yes.
Yes. Did you want to have a kid? Yes. Where is resistance to change? Will you please stop with this nonsense? We resist change if we have reason to believe that the change is not good for us. If we have reason to believe that the change is good for us, we'll fight for it. This means that if we want to change a company, we have to make sure that whatever we do is a win-win-win-win-win for every subgroup that we need their collaboration. If we do that, we are talking about enormous energies that moves toward improving. If we don't do that, we can continue to complain about resistance to change. But if it's not a win-win, then means it's wrong. Think again. I want to take all of that. And then at the end, I want to finish with, fellas, I'm not talking about just organizations. You are an organization. So I want that people will understand it for themselves. Let me ask you a question. Do you want easy life? The truth, please. Come on, do you want easy life? Come on, come on, come on. Everyone that wants easy life, raise your hand. Come on. If you really want easy life, I have a very powerful suggestion for you. Why won't you take a hammer, a big one, and hit yourself on the head hard? You will have very easy life. They will bring the food to your bed. Ladies and gentlemen, do you want easy life? Why don't we admit it? We want meaningful life. And for meaningful life, we are willing to fight. We are willing to make efforts. We are willing to overcome obstacles. Hopefully, we can do it in an environment that everybody is working with us for that. Hopefully, we can do it in an environment that doesn't have conflicts and so on. But this is possible. That's exactly what I want to show you. Even in organizations, it's possible. Definitely, it's possible within whatever pocket, which is smaller than organizations. And the key is so obvious. The key is just, will you please learn to use cause and effect? Will you please learn not just to recognize common sense, which every person is able, will you please learn to create common sense? Let's prove Mark Twain to be wrong. Mark Twain has said, common sense is not common at all. Unfortunately, so far he's right. Why won't we learn how to do it? In these 3 days, I'm going to start from how do you generate immediate cash, so you have breathing space, all the way to how do you generate decisive competitive edge, how do you translate it so that the operation and sales will go into it. I have to put a new concept there, which is a concept of sustain, which no textbook is talking about, which is the minute that you've built a competitive edge and you've learned how to capitalize on it, the real problem is how to sustain it. Otherwise, it crashes itself. The whole issue of sustain is not dealt at all in the textbooks. I want to show that. I want to demonstrate it, not on every company, but I want to show you the 5 generic solutions, which all are in the public domain. I don't know if you know it. Everything that I'm doing, I'm putting in the public domain. I claim that no one has a right to have monopoly on such knowledge. The problem is that you have to invest something in order to learn to read. And that's not a triviality. Yes, these 3 days will enable you to read the S&Ts. They are all in the public domain. You can reach them through the internet, through many, many channels. What I want to do then is to really start to show you to what extent these huge changes can be done a step at a time. Never 2 steps in parallel by the same person, because otherwise you don't get focusing. And how easy it is if you just understand the full logic, and because of it you are fully able to communicate it, and how really easy it is. And I'm going to show you so many cases where it's done, even in incredibly impossible situations on a major scale, on the most bureaucratic environments. What I want to make sure that everyone that comes out of it will have enough knowledge how to take the first steps immediately to prove to himself that I'm right in his environment, and then come and learn more, and then do it to the full extent. But I want to make sure that everyone that comes will be able to take the immediate first steps to prove to himself that this is not a pie in the sky, that it's real, more real even than what I wrote in the goal. Please come! Don't you realize of what are we talking about? We are talking about a better world. We are talking about that as long as we continue with this extrapolation, we are shooting ourselves in the foot all the time. And ladies and gentlemen, as much as we want to fool ourselves, we are not John Wayne. When we shoot from the hip, usually we shoot our own foot. Questions? Questions? Who will be the first courageous person to ask?
If you have a question, we have a microphone up front here. You want to come on up? So that, because we're actually simulcasting this presentation around the world. So we'd like to make sure that everybody can hear the questions that are asked.
By the way, contrary to the common belief, I do not eat people. Yes.
What do you think will be the effect of the bailout that just went on?
What do you mean by the bailout?
The stimulus package.
I don't care. I'll tell you why. Ladies and gentlemen, it's about time to understand. It's not what the government does which really counts. It's what we are doing, which has 10 times more power. I'm very happy with this package. I'm very happy with Obama. And it doesn't matter anyhow. It's us that count. One great American has said, don't ask what you can do, what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country. I'm saying, don't even ask it, just do what makes sense. That's enough.
In your data, you showed how at retail, the unit demand actually rose by dropping prices. What this means to retailers is that their net profitability at the end of the year will be lower.
This means to retailers, the ones that are really looking in the mirror, that just shoots himself in the foot for no reason.
Bear with me.
But you're right.
Okay, there has been, well, a notable example is the world market for ski gear, for instance. Many years ago had this problem. They ran into a couple of seasons of bad snow, and then they had to extend their terms, and the terms went first to net 60, then net 90, then net 180, and in some cases net 360. They ended up with a cash flow problem where actually it was a profit generation problem where they got behind the power curve and they were never able to recover.
Correct.
Now, to what extent do you think that might be a factor in the future?
Why do you think I'm here?
Please?
Why do you think I'm here? Why do you think last week I was jumping all over India? Why do you think that now I will immediately leave here and go to Pittsburgh and so on? Because the danger is real. Let's understand something. Major part of the industry is participating in selling the goods through the retail. A larger part is not in that channel. They are feeding other section of the industry with machines, with systems, and so on. If you notice, because of the huge scare, and this time it's not just an idle scare, there is still a liquidity problem. Most companies are delaying the investments. So everyone that is in the business of more machinery or systems and so on will go through a real, relatively long period. Who knows if he can survive it? If we can shrink it, we will not have problems. Major part of the length until companies will realize there was no reason, let's move, because the market is growing. We need to put these investments. If we'll delay on that, we will start to lose the infrastructure. And then the bloody bastards might be right. There will be economic recession. We are not off the hook yet. But the more we are back to our senses, the more we move, it's better. Now, if you are in providing systems or machinery to others, this does not mean that you cannot increase your market like that. What you have to realize is that the top concern of your clients have changed, but you have not changed it in accordance. The top concern of your client was return on investment, was profitability. Today it's not. It's cash and liquidity. And because of it, they are delaying. Will you please change your offer? And there is a way to do it. So you become super attractive to them to buy it immediately. And by that, you bypass it all. There is a way to do it. If you just think cause and effect. That's what I want to show in these 3 days. And to encourage these people, because I don't believe that this will be on a national scale. But at least those that are in that situation can save themselves. The only way to save the whole thing is to shrink the time that we still think that it's a recession. If we go out of it in 2 months, most of the manufacturers that manufacture infrastructure, machines, systems, and so on will not get hurt. But if it will be 6 months, we will start to see it drop. And this drop might start a spiral. That's what I'm afraid of. It's still possible. Did I answer your question?
Thank you.
You're welcome. Oh, by the way, let's help it from another direction. Fellas, we don't think to the extent that last week I sat with some of my friends, rich investors, super conservative investors, and we've done some calculations. Do you know what is today the best investment? It's a subprime. The prices are so low that if you do all the calculation, you'll find out that this is the most secure investment with the highest return. I hope that more and more people will realize it because it has huge ramifications. So many of the banks have invested their own money in this subprime or equivalents, and because it's undervalued today to a crazy rate, the self-money of the banks is very low. Now remember, the banks cannot lend as much as they want. There has to be a ratio between their self-money and how much they're lending. The self-money is now so devaluated, unrealistically, that they have problems of lending even if they want. So if we are bringing it back to reasonable levels, and reasonable levels means only one thing: what is the real risk, what is the real return, and according to that to evaluate it, and not according to scares and extrapolations, the liquidity problems of the bank will be solved. On that point, I want to ask you something. I've heard very troubling cases where banks came to industry and said, give me back the line of credit. Now I will give you a loan in percentages, in interest, which are over 20%. If you're running into such cases, will you please write to your senator? If I would have heard it only once, fine, that's one crazy bank or one crazy person. I've heard it too many times. Will you please write to the senator? Here's the banks using government money to take interest which is not even a mafia interest. That's super crazy. We should not allow such a thing. So write to your senators, and I'm sure the Senate will act. More questions? Yes.
Thank you for the talk. I have a very simple question. Given that there are 2 billion people, India and China, coming online to the middle class, and that you're looking to get us out of the recession or the fake recession, the growth that will be coming up and the collision in the future with sustainability is inevitable. Can you speak how the theory of constraints can help the world prepare for?
Let me explain to you, there is no collusion. It's only in your mind. There is a potential for win-win.
And that's what I'd like to hear.
And that's exactly what I want. But if we are 6 weeks away from their markets, there will be, in our eyes, a collusion. That's why I'm begging, will you please cut these weeks to 24 or 48 hours? Because then we can all contribute and all we can enjoy. Otherwise, it will be on our expense. And fellows, I'm terrified of it. China is leading. China is not a communist country. Anybody that have been in China knows to what extent communism in China is simply out of. But China is a totalitarian country. Do you want a totalitarian country to become the #1 power in the world? I'm shivering from it. That's why it's so important that the US will continue to have its economical strengths. And for that, we must come closer to the main consumption world. Remember, US have a huge advantage in terms of the infrastructure, in terms of the number of engineers, in terms of the number of finance. And by the way, I do not distinguish between service industry and manufacturing. They are all supplying real needs of the market. In this sense, the US is the most advanced. Why are we going to lose it all? Just because we are blind? Just because we are too far away from them? That's craziness. Fellas, you are talking about the American way of living your life? You are talking about democratic world? Let's make sure that this will continue. I don't see terrorism as #1 threat. #1 threat, and I'm talking about 10 or 15 years down the road, that's all, is that America losing its power because they've lost its economical power. And what I see is that as long as we will, in America, will be remote from the major world markets, we will lose it. There is no doubt. And it's so easy not to lose it and to maintain the huge advantage that America has. Fellas, America has a huge advantage. You want to see it? Go again, do a search of how many articles in science, in technology, are stemming from America versus the rest of the world. You'll see what a fantastic advantage US has. But we're going to lose it. Did I answer the question? Person that asked it.
Yes, thank you.
You're welcome. Yes.
Yes, hi there. We're apple growers from Eastern Washington, and in China, they grow 10 times more apples than the United States. 85% of the apples that they grow in China are made in a concentrate and exported. I use that as an example is that Chinese people don't drink apple juice. In other words, the manufacturing economies of many of these countries like China are totally focused on what I've been hearing you call the legacy consumer. Do you see a challenge with the world market basically to retool itself to focus then on the new rising consumers with this world? Because I feel the U.S. is not very good.
It's happening already. And if you go to China, you see in what scale it's happening. You're talking about the past, not the future. This is done already. By the way, my perception of China before I started to go there was rickshaws and so on. I went to China 2 years ago. I've decided, okay, I'm going out of the industrial zone. I went all the way to Tibet. It's not the industrial zone. It's everywhere. By the way, in all this trip, 2 weeks trip, I've seen one statue of Mao Zedong. One single one. They are not communists. They are totalitarian. They are not communist. And you see the wealth everywhere. 5 lanes in each direction. You see the cars which are not less than the European cars. Yeah. And then you talk with people and you find out to what extent the middle class is already a reality. This is not a threat. Don't look on it as a threat. Look on it as a total growth. What we have to make sure is that we will not be cut off from that. But we are cutting ourselves off, nobody else. Nobody's trying to cut us off. It's we that don't put the bridges. 20 years ago, I talked with General Motors, and I said, what about selling in Japan? And they said, they don't want to buy American cars. Ladies and gentlemen, do you know on which side of the road the Japanese are driving? Show me any effort from GM to supply the Japanese cars with the wheel in the right situation. No, the American said, you change. Can you imagine it? By the way, it went to the extent that in Japan there were factories that were switching the wheel of American cars to sell it. Of course, it was 15,000 cars a year, which is not even a drop in the bucket. But the attitude of America was, you change the way you drive, not that we will provide you with the cars that you want. Fellas, this attitude still exists. You think that the Israelis are arrogant? Look on yourself from the outside. And yes, Israelis are arrogant. General Yates, the general of the US Air Force that put TOC into the Air Force, have told me personally that there are three types of people in the world: multilingual, bilingual, and Americans. Wake up. America is a huge market. The rest of the world is slightly bigger. Yes.
So as a follow-up to that, the current stimulus package has a provision for Buy American. Could you comment on the wisdom of that approach?
Fellas, again, let me repeat again. Yes, I see that, I call it fluke, luck, call it whatever you want. The new administration in the US is overall taking very good steps. I don't care. Fellas, that's not where the solution will come. The solution will come from us. Will you please start to realize it? Who do you think have more power? All the industry, all the organizations in America, or the White House? Will you please take the responsibility? And don't look what they are doing. Do it for yourself. Do it for your own good. But if you are using common sense, it's for the good of everybody. There is no contradictions. Let me tell you something personally. I was raised by a very unique father. My father was the member of the first parliament of Israel, probably the youngest. And he told me, Eli, never think that you are above that phrase that power corrupts. So never go to politics. This is etched so much in my head that I have barriers against talking to politicians. At the same time, I'm a firm believer that we can influence our own destiny, our own lives. And we should not do it with brute force. We should do it only with common sense, only with win-win solutions. Otherwise, anyhow, it will not work. I am against revolutions. Revolutions are bloody. I am against evolutions. I am for evolutions. The mistake is that people think that evolutions are slower than revolutions. This is not correct. If you decipher the cause and effect, if you communicate the cause and effect, evolutions are by far faster than revolutions. Let's do it. Look, I wrote my first book in 1983, The Goal. Until today, this is probably the #1 management book that's selling in the world. 25 years. I haven't found yet a mistake there. 25 years. It definitely stood the time test, the enormous test of all the industry. Every type of manufacturing. Then look on my textbook, one after the other, each one of them. It's about time to start to ask, if it's done on such a scale, are we using common sense? If it's in one territory, one field, fine, we didn't pay attention, maybe. But on such a scale, don't you realize that we simply don't learn? We are not educated to do cause and effect. Don't you realize that it's in our power Don't you realize more than that? That this ability is in the hands of a 5-year-old kid? 5-year-old kids have the two gifts. One is extrapolating a generic lesson for even one event. This is a fantastic gift. You know, the 5-year-old kid that touched a hot stove, he have learned a generic lesson. Unbelievably, in order to learn and do things. But he has the other gift, that you must have both in order to really know your way in life. What is the most favorable question on a 5-year-old? Why? Cause and effect. You see something, immediately why. You give the answer, why again? In other words, he's diving in the cause and effect. He's building a map. And then we answer. And then immediately comes the next why. And then what do we say? Go to your mother. Or even worse, when you will grow, you will know. By the way, every time that you say it, check yourself. Do you know the answer? You'll find out that the answer is no, you didn't. So what did you say? You cheated your kid? No, you said incorrectly. When you will grow, you will know. You will know not to ask. We'll beat you out. We'll beat it out of you. For heaven's sake, yes, it's as simple as that. For example, my books are used mainly in the MBA, in the second degree, not in the first. Do you know why? Because the professor claimed that when they are using my books on the first grade students, the students said, it's so obvious, don't tell us that everybody's not doing it. So first of all, let's wait until they will be in a plant so that we'll know that everything is opposite and then we can use it. By the way, do you know which country is now leading in TOC by far? It's Japan. I didn't allow my books to be translated into Japanese until 6 years ago. Because I was under the impression that TOC fits the Japanese culture like a glove. And yes, the Japanese culture is very different than ours. The Japanese culture is built on cherishing something that they call wa, harmony. In a very crazy way. For example, you hurt me, I don't like you, I cannot tell it to you. Because I will hurt the harmony. I can stab you in the back, but I cannot tell it to you directly. This is Japanese way. I'm not joking. I said the gap due to Taichi Ono between the Japanese industry and the Western industry is so big, and my impression is that they will accept TOC not because of its logic, but because of the harmony, the beautiful harmony that comes out from TOC all over the place. You know, every conflict is removed and so on. This fantastic harmony, which is the base of TOC, that they will go on it and will increase the gap, and by that they increase even more the trade imbalance, and then everything can go down the drain. And I said, I can wait. So I will not get my royalties. So what? 6 years ago, I came to the conclusion that the gap is totally closed. That's when I've allowed my books to be published in Japan. All my speculations came true. Japan is using TOC now on a fantastic scale, including the government in Japan. The big companies are going now one after the other, and I'm talking about the largest companies in Japan. In terms of books, my books are sold in Japan more than in the rest of the world together. The things that bothered me is I came out with my latest book called The Choice, that really shows how all the previous books have been written, have been thought out. In other words, the base for thinking in this way. The base of thinking clearly, and why, and how effective it is, and what you have to do in order to go on it. In the States so far, 30,000 copies have been sold. In Japan, in the first weeks that came out, it broke the record. Over 100,000 copies in the first week, more than Harry Potter. I should be very happy, I'm not happy of the imbalance. Not at all. Not that I'm not happy that they're doing it. What I'm not happy is that US, that has such a huge starting point, where the biggest implementations of TOC, if you're talking about scale, is the US Air Force. It's the US Navy, with fantastic results that they are not keeping to themselves, they're putting it in the public domain. The industry in general, in the US, is now behind Japan industry. Why do we repeat the same mistake a second time? Last question.
So if the self-fulfilling prophecy comes true,
God
and
forbid.
American business doesn't wake up and doesn't take heed that this should be a period of growth rather than a period of panic, will an individual company's strategy have to change at that point?
No.
At all?
No, the strategy has to be changed. But can individual companies still prosper?
Yes.
Yes, definitely.
It will have to change.
Oh, no. Here I will quote Dr. Deming. Deming said, survival is not mandatory. There is an option to die. Can it be done? Yes. Is it more difficult if you are the only one who's doing it? Surprisingly, it's easier. So you cannot find shelter even in that. Find another excuse. But if you are a patriot, it's so gloomy. Why? Why should we do it? Look, I'm not an American. At the same time, in the last 30 years, I've spent here minimum 3 months on and off every year. Being an Israeli, America is so important for me, and I'm so grateful for America. I don't believe that Israel could have survived without America on the other side of the pond. We Israelis have a problem. We don't have any problem to invent, but it's almost impossible to do the same thing twice. You have the discipline as well. You are a great nation, maybe because you are the melting pot of all cultures of the world, and you are still the melting pot. So everyone can identify with US. More than that, you have the best governing systems that exist. It doesn't matter who is in the White House. The system is healthy. The system is good. The morals are so high, except for one thing. The non-smoking epidemic makes me crazy. It's on the verge of immoral. My American friends, please wake up. Thank you very much.